Now then, I'm Burnsy, and welcome to our regular Curiosity podcast, the CuriosityCast. Every episode, we take questions asked by members of the public in Hull and try to get them the best answers from the very best brains in the city of Hull. Not all questions are about Hull. They can be about whatever you want to discover. This episode, we're answering your questions on what's going on in Hull. That's what's going on with major works, or public realm as they call it. We've had lots of questions starting with what's going on with X or Y. So we've pulled in Ace reporter, regular Curiosity contributor, and a man who's always had his finger on the pulse of what's happening in Hull as a reporter at the Hull Daily Mail, and now for the new free newspaper for Hull, the Hull Story. Angus Young joins us on the Curiosity Cast. How are you, Angus? Nice to see you.
I'm very well, Burnsy, and thanks for inviting me in.
And still got the finger on the pulse. I feel I ought to buy him a beer here, because when I had a show on the radio, he was like my unpaid producer, because he would always turn up stories that I'd turn into radio that people wanted to talk about.
He's always been the man in the shadows, finding facts and passing them on
alongside Hank Marvin?
Yeah. He always felt like Deep Throat in
funnily enough, my dad went to the same school as Hank Marvin.
Did he really?
Hank Marvin was about 3 years older than him.
Oh,
well, there we go.
Can he do the dance?
No.
I've no questions about Hank Marvin. So let's go to the questions. A big one for the city of Hull and all those who pass through it, heading to the docks or away from the docks. Here you go, Angus. Is the A63 work still on deadline? This coming from Carl in the Beverley area.
All right, Carl. Yes, it is. The last time I heard, I did ask them a couple of weeks ago, them being Highways Agency, or National Highways, or whatever they call themselves these days. And yes, it is still on course to be finished around about May of next year, 2025.
I've stood on what I like to call Burnsy's Bridge, but it's got another title, over the A63, and looked westwards. I better get my geography right. And it's under the ground now, isn't it? It's coming along nicely.
Yeah, you did a grand job with that bridge, didn't you? Yeah, it is. It's I like to see it as a big sort of scale electrics track, because if you imagine when it's all finished, you come in sort of eastwards and you rise over Daltrey Street flyover, and then you plunge into the depths of the new underpass or whatever, tunnel or whatever you want to call it. And then you're back up again over Mountain Bridge, and it's a real up and down affair, I should imagine. And then you get stuck in the traffic lights at Victoria Dock. But I think it'll be quite an interesting drive when it's finished.
Yeah, I've looked at it this week with some of the weather, and we're recording this sort of mid-September. If you're listening several months down the line, this is when it's going out, and all the information is current as of this time. And I've wondered, because we all wondered when they first proposed it, is it flooding? But I've seen no hint that it's flooding or anything like that. Have you?
No, they keep reassuring everybody that it's going to be flood-free. I think it's a really interesting technical build, without getting too nerdy about it all. They've effectively put a big concrete box in the middle of ground conditions that are always described as blancmange, and they've managed to sort of sit it in there. They've got the river tidal issues as well as the water table right next to the docks. So from that point of view, it's really interesting, a little bit beyond me in terms of technicality, but to actually get something into those ground conditions, watertight, fingers crossed, yeah.
We don't mind nerdy on the Curiosity Cast. Somebody once said to me, who knows these things, that drilling there was like drilling through soup.
Yeah, soup, blancmange, take your pick. It's anything that's built in Hull that needs firm foundations needs a hell of a lot of big piling to go in.
But there's different kinds of soup, isn't there?
Here comes the restaurant critic.
There's thinner soups and there's like creamy soups,
Right.
So it doesn't,
still
it's not
soup
helpful.
at the end of the day.
I suppose it's not solid, is the point.
Right.
It could be a minestrone, bits of carrot and stuff.
Yeah.
Conversational dead end, I do apologise.
This is producer Dave, by the way.
One thing I guess people will be wanting to know, you might not know this, Angus, will the traffic situation alleviate any time, or is it going to be this bad right through the build?
Well, the whole idea of it, when it's finished, is to ease east-west traffic, so to and from the docks, basically. and I think that will work. Although, as I say, you've got this traffic lights still on Victoria Dock roundabout, which was done in advance of the works, and I still have a bit of a question mark over that, because one of the ideas was to get rid of all the traffic lights in the junctions on Castle Street, and they're going to do that, but then you're going to end up with traffic lights on Victoria Dock, so the traffic will still stop and start there.
Wasn't it meant to get rid of every traffic light between here and Liverpool? Was the idea?
Indeed, if you're old enough, like we are, we can all remember the Melton lights, and they went with a new junction there, and there won't be any traffic lights here. You've got your Burnsy Bridge to get across. You've got Porter Street Bridge, which is not as sexy, and then you've got the crossing at underneath the Mountain Bridge now, because there isn't going to be another bridge to get you to the fruit market at Marketplace.
So it's the sticking point where it'll all come undone then, is it, those traffic lights on the Roger Millward Way, yeah?
Potentially, yes. I mean, they redesigned that roundabout to keep it flowing with traffic lights.
It doesn't.
But it doesn't. And I think that will be the next issue down the line, I think, yeah.
All this is costing a lot of money. It's one of the biggest projects, I think, Angus, in the history of the city. Where are they at with the budget? Is anybody talking about that as to whether they're going to hit the budget?
I think they're on time. I had a couple of redesigns, I believe, of the actual mechanics of lowering the road into that blancmange soup that we're talking about. But I think £355 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard of any overruns on that. If it was a couple of years behind, then yes, there would probably be a question mark. But I think they're probably going to be bob on that one.
And just a quick straw poll amongst the three of us, and I'll go first. I think it's actually made a difference to the flow of traffic, even though it is a bit electricity track at the moment through the city until you get maybe the other side. No,
it's hard to tell. I think at the minute it just seems like a real big knot.
I think it is too early to tell, because there's have lane closures and narrow traffic and things like that. I think the whole issue with the A63 in Hull going out to the bridge and beyond is that it's still relatively. It's not a motorway, is it? It hasn't got a hard shoulder, and if something happens out on, near St Andrew's Dock or whatever, then the whole city grinds to a halt, because you haven't got a hard shoulder and you can't know where to go for the traffic.
And if I ever talk to anybody in a position of responsibility again, and I suspect it probably won't happen, I'd be asking what happens if a car breaks down in the underpass.
Yeah.
You get a big traffic jam in Hull.
Well, yeah.
I think one of the interesting issues is great for transport, I think, east to west, but I do think the access to the fruit market, which I know is one of your favourite places, Burnsy, from a pedestrian point of view, I do wonder whether it actually will sort of isolate that area a bit more for foot traffic, because going under Mountain Street Bridge is a bit of a hike. Some people say, well, it's only another 5 minutes, but it's not as direct as walking across from King Bailey Statue across those traffic lights as was. And then suddenly you're there in the fruit market. You've got to do a bit of a detour, and I'm not too sure whether that on a cold, wet February night is going to be very pleasant for a lot of people.
Let's hope so. It is one of my favourite places. Angus Young is our guest on the CuriosityCast. We'll go to question number 2. And this sort of ties into the first question. Why has Queen's Gardens become so expensive? Who pays, says John in HU5 in the Avenue. So we think the A63 is on budget and on track, and that's government money. Queen's Gardens is not really government money, is it?
No, it's not. It's council money. So ultimately we pay as council taxpayers. And it's gone up from originally 4.9 million to just over 20 million, which is a bit of a leap. As I understand it, a lot of it is to do with very expensive Chinese granite. That's going to be laid along one sort of side of the gardens, on the Guildhall side of the gardens. And it has overrun. I think COVID's delayed it. I think there's been issues with the old dock walls that were collapsing supposedly and needed re-strengthening. They had to take them out, as I understand, replace them. But yeah, it's a big chunk of extra money, that a big overspend, if you like.
So it's 4 to 5 times up in on the original budget. 4 if my maths is right.
It can't be down to just the grass, can it? And COVID for that much money.
Granite.
Granite. Sorry,
Granite.
grass.
Grass.
Right, what grass are you buying? Gregor will not answer that question on the Curiosity Cast.
Granite, sorry.
They're very expensive, I've been told, Chinese granite. And whether they're using more of it, or I don't know. But it is a big overspend. And I'm not entirely personally convinced that it's going to look any better than it maybe should have done with a bit more imagination and a lot less money.
I think even the best drawings I've seen of it don't look particularly good.
No, I mean, the whole idea behind that was to create a bigger area for outdoor events and performances and things like that. But I thought the whole point of the 2017 Public Realm Works was to create those sort of areas in the city centre and beyond, in Crewmarket and wherever. So I don't see why we'll have to have another big outdoor performance area. I mean, Zebedee's Yard's perfect for stuff. But now we're going to... It looks to me like a bit of a car park, to be honest, at the end of the day. And I'm not too sure whether it should be a bit greener.
Right. It's the lung of the city, isn't it? The Queen's Gardens. And there's been a bit of controversy about some of the trees that have come out. They've replaced trees. So at a time when councils plead poverty, and councils are always pleading poverty, and this is going to be tough. Does this mean people's rates are going to go up in the city, the council tax?
Well, ultimately, it will form part of your annual council tax increase, a few bob here and there. But yes, it hasn't gone to plan, finance-wise, and we're going to have to pay the price for it.
And when's it going to be ready? What's the latest there?
Yeah, well, it's all supposed to tie in with the wider maritime project, which is funded mainly by the lottery. The whole idea of it, as well as the outdoor performance area, was to create a sort of a route between the Maritime Museum and where the Arctic Corsair will end up off High Street. So there is a sort of a distinct route between the two you can take, and through the gardens will be that route.
We will flow beautifully, like the people that are going to be flowing through the gardens to and fro. To this question, I've jumped a question here. I'll come back to the other one. When can we get back inside the Maritime Museum, says Robin HU4, the Anlaby Road area? What's the latest there?
I think that's due to be completed in 2025. I think in the summer of 2025, the exterior of the building, as you can probably see if you walk past now, is just about finished.
It's looking lovely, isn't it?
All the hoarding is down, and it is absolutely a fantastic building to look at. I would recommend, if anybody is new to Hull, or if you've been in Hull all your life, just to spend 5 minutes outside that building, taking it all in, because it is a wonderful building to look at. You just need to count the starfish on the walls. There's hundreds of them. So yeah, fantastic to look at on the outside. They've done a great job, and it's due to open middle of next year. I just hope that the inside is going to match the outside in terms of.
There's been some very positive noises just the last couple of days from people in the council saying they'd had a little visit inside.
Yeah, there was a tour last week, and it's to see a work in progress. And I mean, the courtroom, which overlooks Queen Victoria Square on the first floor, there's a magnificent room in itself. And I think hopefully the displays will be state of the art. They're opening up one of the towers so you can get into one of the domes for the first time. So that'll give people a new view out. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Is it one of your favourite buildings? What's your favourite? I'm just going for it now. Now he's talked about buildings. There's some lovely buildings. What's your favourite building?
Ooh,
I don't know why I've gone very quiet now. What's your favourite? It's a late night podcast. What's your favourite building?
Punch is beautiful. You know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Really
I think you can spend 5 minutes looking at the Maritime Museum, and then you can just turn to your, depending on which way you're looking, but turn to your left and you can look at what used to be the Yorkshire Bank, the Penny Bank. That's a fantastic building. Now Cafe Nero. And then you can look to the Punch, look to the City Hall, have a wander around the City Hall and look at all the artists who are engraved in stone up on the upper floors of the City Hall. Not many people actually know they're up there, but you can spot your Rembrandts and your whatever up there when it used to be an art gallery. It's a fantastic building to take in. So a good half an hour in Queen Victoria Square, dodging the fountains, looking at the buildings, fantastic.
It is a city where you can look up. There is a virtue in looking up. I've said it before, but I've never quite looked at the detail. Angus, you've looked at it, so I shall look with renewed eyes.
And then
I'll probably bump into a lamppost as I'm looking up, or somebody's on the mobile phone coming the other way, not concentrating.
And you've got the Burton building just across the road. That's, as we speak, currently being refurbished and brought back to its glory as an Art Deco building. I mean, that's a beautiful building, and going back to granite, that's black granite that's being used on that.
What's it going to be? Is it going to be offices or apartments?
Offices, I believe, on the upper floors, and retail on the ground floor. But fantastic looking building, and if you're into Art Deco, it probably holds best Art Deco building.
Just on the Maritime Museum, you mentioned the North End shipyard visitor attraction. Is that opening at the same time? Is this all going to happen in one big weekend or something like that? What do we know?
I believe it's going to be pretty sort of synchronised, so you move seamlessly from one to another. But yes, the Arctic Corsair, if I had a grape, I think it's going in the wrong place, but it's too late for that now.
I was going to say, yeah, we're back to the grumpy old men now.
Yeah. So yeah, the work that Dunstans have done on the Arctic Corsair down at their shipyard has been fantastic. I've had a look at it close up, and yeah, it looks brilliant. And in a dry dock setting, you're going to get the full whack of a trawler and the sheer size of it out of the water. I think that would be quite something. But like I say, from a personal opinion, I think it's in the wrong place.
It's in the back of the college on the River Hull, yes?
Yeah, it's in an old North End. It's called the North End Shipyard. It's a very historic old shipyard on the River Hull off Dock Office Road.
It's nice to be using that bit of stretch of the river, though. Where would you put it?
I would have put it on St Andrew's Dock, which we may come to later. But I think the issue there is that trawlers never went there. It was other shipping that went in there, and you didn't get trawlers being repaired in that shipyard, and you certainly didn't get them built in that shipyard. So it's a bit of a sort of strange cuckoo in the nest type of thing. But in saying that, it's going to take people to that part of the city centre, yeah, it's difficult to see what other uses they would have for it.
And just from a personal point of my one of my interests, can we see the statue, if it ever happens, whatever memorial to Big Lil and all the lasses of the Headscarf Revolutionaries? I personally think that's where it should be. If you're pointing people in that direction, maybe a discussion. Your face says you're wrong, Burnsy, Angus.
Well, if you're going to have a big trawler there, you might as well have a big statue there as well.
Can I make a suggestion? I think it should be on the bullnose with Lil jumping off to jump onto one of the boats, which she did, didn't she? Or she threatened to. So I think that would be the perfect place for it.
I'm just not sure you get people out there, would you?
Yeah, that's what we need to work on. Those we need to get work on people getting down there.
I'd like to see a statue of Lil sort of grappling with that policeman.
Yeah.
So you'd have the policeman sort of holding her back if possible, and the other two looking on.
Do check out the Headscarf Revolutionaries and the campaign to try and get an appropriate memorial. Let's go back, and we are going back, and we're going to stay maritime. It's a huge part of the city's history. Galen, HU11, which is North Holderness. Here's one for you, Angus. What's going on with the 3 ships mural?
Well, I've just walked past that and had a look at the update signs, which are the same as the update signs that I saw the last time I walked past it. It's Albion Square development. It's way behind schedule. It's £98 million of council money as well that's gone into it. And the 3 ships is the big sculpture at the front, or the mosaic, or the mural, or whatever you want to call it. And that is being retained while the rest of the site is being demolished, and then a new build will take place eventually behind it. And according to the signs that I've just seen, there's still 35% of walls and ceiling beams covered in asbestos, which is yet to be removed.
Right.
Now, you and I, David, have been talking about the removal of asbestos and what's happening with that building for more years than I care to remember. So it still suggests to me there's an awful lot of work to be done in getting rid of that remaining asbestos in the building that's eventually going to be removed.
So that near £100 million budget might be stretched.
Well, I think it's a bit of a flexible budget, because that was the budget that was put on at the start when there was all sorts of grand plans for potentially an ice arena moving there or whatever. I think there's still a bit uncertainty as to what's going to eventually happen behind the three ships. We've got apartments that are supposedly going to be built there. I can see there's a demand for city centre living, so I think the apartments might work. But as for the rest of it, we've got, at the moment, plans for an urban park. Retail, there's a big question mark about big retail in the city centre. Leisure, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but no real definitive plans or proposals.
So
as to what's going in there.
Right. So we're waiting for people to come forward with money from the private sector and say, yeah, I'll have a bit of that. I like what you've got, and I'll come into Hull and I'll spend some money. Yes.
From a retail point of view and a leisure point of view, yes, there have been proposals for something called the Matrix in there, which you might have heard about. I don't know. Nothing to do with Keanu Reeves, but it attracted a levelling up funding from the last government as part of the £19 million that the council got a couple of years ago for the city centre. Some of it went to Albion Square, some of it went to Whitefriars, and some of it went to this thing called the Matrix. Now, that's supposed to be an arts hub of some description, arts, education, business, startup type of thing. But I haven't heard a lot about that recently. They did confirm it was going into Albion Square. It was going to go into Whitefriars in the old Boots building, but they've changed their mind on that a couple of years ago. Last I heard, it's earmarked for Albion Square, but I'm not clear, and I don't think anybody's clear as to what it's going to be, what function it's going to be, and how it's going to operate, because we're still waiting for piles of asbestos to get removed.
Right. Talking of areas of uncertainty, and you've touched on, shops and retail and empty shops. What's happening in the city centre with all the closed down shops or empty sites and things like that? Is there a cohesive plan? Is there, suddenly are we going to see stuff? Or
well, I think the levelling up money, which the council used, as I say, split it those three different ways. They used a lot of it to part fund, match fund the redevelopment of empty spaces. So things like the Burton building got money from levelling up. Some of the shops down Whitefriars, the Trinity House side of it has had money. Apartments that above shops that weren't apartments, just empty dead space, have been turned into apartments. The project at the Jubilee Church down King Edward Street, that's just started, I think, which is going to create a new frontage for King Edward Street. That is partly levelling up funded. So I think the council, to their credit, have used that levelling up funding quite wisely. There have been controversies, because you've got a burger joint that's just recently opened down Jameson Street that received levelling up funding. But it's in a historic building. So
right. And they filled in the forms and applied, and
the folk filled in the forms. They're a relatively local franchise of a national chain that's ultimately American, but it's not about the burgers. It's about the use of the building and the creation of jobs that goes with it.
Right. Okay. What about the old Debenhams site?
That is a big question mark, I would say, because it is a very big building, and it's a unusually shaped building, and I guess it's probably full of asbestos.
Right.
So it's an entire block virtually.
It is, and it was built in the 50s after the war. And I do look around in other city centre buildings that maybe have lain empty for a long time, that might or might not have been built either side of what used to be the old Co-op, which is the building that we're talking about at Albion Square, and you wonder whether there's a similar issue in some of the other buildings that we're talking about.
I must admit, when I've passed through other city centres and town centres that have had Debenhams, they're in the same sort of, vacant and, like a bad tooth in a half-smiling mouth sort of thing.
I think every city centre is pretty much the same. Some are slightly better or worse than Hull, but it's a difficult time for retail, isn't it?
Yes, very much. Any idea, if anything, Angus, what's going on with St Andrew's Dock? This from Claire in HU8 in North East Hull.
Well, this is probably the longest running saga in Hull, isn't it? Ceased to be in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, partly redeveloped as a retail park at one end of it. The other end was just left, and if you're into graffiti, it's a great place to go to. And if you're into sort of buildings that are on a point of collapse, it's
Lord Line building, yeah?
Yeah, Lord Line, the old pump house, which, believe it or not, is a listed building, but the state of it is, it looks an real mess. And the Boston building with the insurance building, the old Seafish building at the front. It's got all the ingredients there. It's the fantastic location. It's got the history. It's got a very tragic history, as you guys know, in terms of the people who sail from there never to return. But it's a huge infrastructure project in terms of remediation and getting the dock back into some sort of semblance of working order. Access is another issue as well.
Ownership, is it all owned by different people?
Well, that's probably the big stumbling block, and has been for a long time. Yes, it is owned. It's owned by bits of it. There's 3 or 4 different owners. You've got a separate company that owns the buildings, or what's left of them. The land is mainly under the ownership of one person, a local person. And the shopping centre guys who've got the retail park there own little bits of strips of it. And I think ABP own a slight bit towards the east.
Is there any hint that everybody's working together here, or are all these disparate interests not going to come together and it'll continue as it is?
Without getting into legal problems.
Yeah, of course. We wouldn't want that, because we can't afford any good lawyers on the Curiosity Cast.
There's one fly in the ointment that I think we all know about, and it involves the owners of the buildings. If they were removed from the equation, I think things might move a lot smoother.
Rhymes with...
Don't even. You can't afford the lawyers.
No.
The Curiosity Cast lawyers.
The Boston building, I went in a few times when it used to be the Seafish building. Beautiful in there. The marble stairs and the mahogany rails and the murals. I think it's all just completely derelict now, isn't it?
Everything's derelict. Interestingly, I had a chat with somebody who's in some sort of coots with the owner of most of the land. They went to have a look at the Lord Line the other day. This person is a building expert, so I was told, and he was pleasantly surprised as to how sturdy it still is. And it was his opinion that there wasn't any need to demolish it, and it was structurally still quite a sound building.
It would make nice apartments or something like that.
It was honestly, inside it was stunning. It really was. And this was only 10, 12 years ago. Yeah. Not that long ago. For it to be gutted in the way it has is just awful.
I mean, I think there's so much, as an amateur, so much potential, because you've still got a half a dock there that, with a bit of work, could actually function as a water space of some type or other. You've got the access off the A63 already there. You've got to drive through the retail park to get it. There would be, I think, an issue with residential down there because it is a bit remote. But the person who owns most of the land, he has done developments elsewhere, albeit at his pace rather than at maybe anybody else's pace. And it is quite a nice development that he's done. He's done an industrial business park near Willoughby, and it is quite a nice development. Lots of old style reused bricks, buildings that are new but look old, and you can see where he might want to go with it if he gets the chance.
I might sneak in on a night and open the lock gates and turn it back into a dock. See if that gets him moving.
He's going to need a lawyer. Well,
the problem with that, Dave, is that if you did that, the lock pit doesn't actually lead to the dock anymore because you've got a filled-in road in the middle of it.
Plan B.
Take some explosives with you or something like that.
Oh, don't encourage him. Angus, thank you very much for your company. We'll leave it there on the latest episode of the Curiosity Cast. Angus is doing some stuff for Curiosity. You can also read his stuff in the fine new news paper for Hull. It's the new free newspaper, The Hull Story. Do check it out. Remember, you can ask questions and seek answers on the Curiosity website, www.curiosityhull.co.uk, or follow and befriend us on the socials. We're on all of them, where we're Curiosity on all the main feeds. We'll be back very soon with more quality answers to whatever question you'd like to ask.